the meeting. Okay, we've got recording going. Can everybody see that? It's basically just
Yes.
a Word file. Okay, we have the Southern Regional Taxonomy Committee has met several times before this meeting. We actually had a special meeting yesterday to discuss some issues on 3 proposals. We have 6 proposals. Not all of the proposals are on the national website. I believe the oxyaquic subgroup for fragile adults didn't make it to that site, so I have a PDF file of that today that I will show. The artisol's proposal was changed about a week and a half ago, and I've got a copy of that so we can look at the latest copy. I'm not sure that it made it to the national site. But first of all, I guess I and Joey Shaw would like to, I'm the chair, he's co-chair of this taxonomy committee meeting. We would like to welcome you and we welcome your participation in this meeting and welcome your comments and hope to hear all of your comments about any of these proposals today before we complete. Dara Park will be moderating our meeting and help us get through the technology. She's got it recorded. She's going to help us if we do any polling. She's got that set up. So we appreciate your help, Dara. So I guess are there any questions first before we start, and then we'll go into the first proposal. If you,
hey, Wayne.
Yeah.
Wayne, I'm sorry I didn't raise my hand. Joey, is he on the Zoom meeting? I have seen him trying to get on the Teams meeting that may be on his calendar.
Is one of you capable of calling in and and helping him? The way I ended up doing it, I'm not sure if that's the best way, is I set up a Teams meeting for the latest invite, and I put the links to the Zoom meeting that all of you are using today. And I didn't, originally I may have had a Teams meeting, but this is a link to the Zoom meeting that was in the latest invite that I sent to this. So there may be some confusion there. The latest invite I sent out has only the links to the Zoom meeting today.
I'm going to check my email too and see if he sent me an email and I can send him the link.
Okay. Well, I think we can get started. The order we're going to go through is sounds like somebody came on right there. The order we're going to go through is the order that you see on the screen here. We're going to talk about the artisol soil order proposal first. The committee went through all 6 of these, and by consensus, up until yesterday when we had a lot of discussion about the wet soil order, up until yesterday, we had decided that all 6 proposals were approvable and ready, depending on what came out of this meeting today. And so I'll bring up the artisol's proposal. I mentioned earlier that there were some changes in this proposal about a week and a half ago. This is the 22nd draft. There's been a lot of changes since they created this proposal. The main changes were with HAZIC materials and HAZIC suborders and subgroups, if there were any. Those have been changed now to a different term, which I think I like a lot better. Noxic and noxic materials rather than HAZIC. It's like whether you have a red flag or a yellow flag. Between the two, you can see that noxious artifacts are defined here. The HAZIC classifications were one of the last time we reviewed this proposal, were one of the last well, one of the most greatest concerns that people had about how they were handled. And when John presented this to us at one of our earlier meetings this year, we thought that they had properly taken care of the hazard materials and how they would be identified, that they had to be identified by a higher authority than NRCS or the Soil Plant Science Division soil scientists. They had to be identified by EPA or some other federal or state entity. So we thought the proposal was ready to go. And then this last change that changed HAZAC to NOXIC and removed some of the HAZAC suborders, as I believe is correct, actually made the proposal better. And if you do a search now for HAZ in this document, you're only going to find it used in other words besides HAZAC or in suborder terminology. So are there any comments about this from the group? With this new information considered, are there any other comments from the group about any concerns with this proposal going forward as approved? It's been worked on for many years. There's been a lot of refinements. And while there may be some issues that come up in the next several months before the national meeting, we thought that it was ready to go and approvable. But I'd like to hear any comments from any of y'all. Raise your hand if you have them, and we'll hear what you have to say. Or if you just want to say you think it's ready, let us know.
I mean, it's been worked on for, quite a long time. I think like New York and LA, maybe Detroit, I think they classified the series that they had set up using this classification or using this order too. And I think the consensus was that they liked it. It seems like, we've been messing with it for a while, as far as like testing it and everything. And I think taking out the HAZAC materials, I just think that's required, that it's not an option to keep it in. So it seems like this is probably the form that would be what we'd want to, vote on.
Is this Christine?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, I was looking to make sure that your box was flashing. Yes, I talked with a couple of the people that attended the training on urban soil mapping, and they were using the Artisol's proposal in their work, and I heard nothing but positive comments about it. Nothing negative about the classification system. Of course, it's new terminology and new classes, but mapping in urban areas and calling them other than urban land, that's new too. So I think this proposal provides us with a way to identify what the components are in urban land areas, rather than just calling them miscellaneous areas. It's a much needed proposal. Any other comments? Well, the way we've worked before with this committee, and it saved us a lot of time until you get to an issue that has a lot of concerns. If there aren't any concerns, and if the feelings of most of the group is that it should move forward and be approved, we can do that by consensus. Our concept of consensus is that if you have anybody, and today we include everybody, whether they're a member of the committee or not, if anybody has any concerns about this moving forward, but they're willing to go along with the decision of the group to let it be approved, we can approve it by consensus. So if that's the situation, I'd say based on what I've heard, we can approve this particular proposal by consensus. Any nays to that decision? I see Joey has joined us.
Yes, I'm here, Wayne. I tried to
Okay.
join through Teams, I guess. Yeah, but I'm here now.
Well, I'm sorry if I caused any confusion. I didn't really know how to send the invite in Zoom. And so I sent it through Teams with a link to the Zoom meeting. I'm sorry about any confusion. So we'll consider this one approved status by consensus. And we'll go on to the next one. The next proposal was actually, it's not on the national site. The last time I looked, it was proposed by Kevin Godsey and Ken Sheffy, the late Ken Sheffy. But somehow, it was proposed back in 2016, but somehow it got lost through the cracks some kind of way. Let me see, the link to that one is not working for me unless it's showing somewhere else. Oh, here it is. There it is. Okay, hopefully when I drag it over there, can you see it, or do I need to share again, Dara?
You're good. We can
You
see
good?
it. You might
Awesome.
want to just try to zoom in so the font's a little bit bigger.
Okay. Well,
It's up top in the middle of your screen where you see the hand on the Adobe Acrobat document, and then the minus and plus, and then the percentage.
what's it next to?
The hand that's actually on the Adobe Acrobat document. Yeah, right below where your mouse was.
Oh, I see.
There you go.
Right here.
Yep.
Okay, I got it. Been a while, been a couple of years since I used Zoom. Okay, here's the proposal, and I'll just give you a thumbnail description of it. Hopefully I can get it where you can see them. This oxyaquid subgroup for fragiudults, there is an oxyaquid subgroup for fragiudals. I think Kevin Godsey recognized that they had a lot of fragiudults in Missouri and other places that were also should be oxyaquid. They were certainly wet enough, just as wet as the oxyaquid fragiudals, but for some reason there's never been that subgroup established, and so it was logical that that subgroup should be established with the same criteria as oxyaquid fragiudals. And we had a meeting where we discussed it. This particular proposal, we couldn't find any fault with it. There were some questions though that we explored through another meeting, and let me see if I can get that up on the screen. Well, I know a way to do it, but I'll have to. My screens with Zoom are working different than they do on Teams. Having trouble seeing things or finding things. Okay. Here's one way to do it. Yeah, fragiudult discussion notes is what I want to show you. We had a group of soil scientists, including Matt McCauley, Dave Gearing, Jerry McIntosh, and we were led this way by Rick Livingston. They met with me on Friday, May 20th, and we discussed these issues. All of them agreed that there should be an oxyaquid subgroup for fragiudults, just like there is for fragiudals. They all agree that these will be most commonly mapped and classified on less than 6% slopes and moderately well drained or wetter drainage classes. And it's logical because on the lower slopes, it takes water, it has a longer residence time. Water that gets in the soil above the fragipan gets perched, and it takes longer for it to flow out. You can start getting over 6% slopes, and then get up to, as item 3 says here, up to 15 to 18% slopes. And the water drains off so fast that probably most of those, in most cases, 15 to 18% slopes would be typic rather than oxyaquic if we had a subgroup of oxyaquic for fragile adults. Here's another comment everybody agreed on. Most of the wetter fragipan soils, wetter than moderately well drained, would likely meet the aquic rather than oxyaquic subgroup. And that would be under 6% slope. As you go to steeper slopes, they're going to drain faster, drain better, and that would be less likely to be the case that they would be aquic as you get up to steeper slopes. There was a question of why the upper 10 inches in the argillic and fragile adults is used as the criteria, I guess, for aquic, and 40 centimeters or 16 inches, the dominant chroma at that depth. I think we'll answer that question here at the bottom. Alpha soils tend to be the lush parent material with higher base saturation. Ultra soils are dominantly on residual parent material. That's just a generalization, generally true. Fragipans tend to be associated with discontinuities. This was the observation of this group of scientists. There was a suggestion made. This particular proposal doesn't have a sponsor. Kevin originally proposed it, Kevin Godsey, and he's not willing to sponsor it. He felt kind of jilted when it didn't make it the first time, but it really just fell through the cracks. It was a good proposal. So we're looking for a sponsor to carry it through, and haven't decided on one yet. And now here's an item on how oxyaquic fragile adults should be defined. And this is the criteria I'm showing here in red for oxyaquic fragile adults. It should be identical except for the reference to the order in each one of these. Now here's another thing that came up that actually would be a new proposal regarding the current key soil.
Can I butt in a second? Can you zoom in, go down the lower right so we can
Oh,
read
yes.
it?
Yes, sorry.
At least
Sorry
fit the
about that.
page.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
Huh?
print is a little small because it's in Word.
Down in the lower right, you got a plus and minus. Yeah, click on there and make it bigger.
Okay. Okay, let me get it going in the right direction. Thank you, Roy.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate it. I
Oh,
really
yeah.
want to see this.
Regarding the current key soil taxonomy and how aquic fragile adults, I guess it should say, misspelling there, and aquic fragile adults are defined. The definition is below on the 12th edition keys, which is the latest one we have available. The group felt there's no reason to define these differently, and that aquic fragile adults should be redefined exactly like aquic fragile adults. And you can see that a 40 centimeter depth is used here on fragile adults that have in one or more horizons within 40 centimeters of the mineral surface redox depletions with a chroma of 2 or less. And then down here on fragile adults, they say in one or more subhorizons above the fragipan within the upper 25 centimeters of the argillic or candic horizon, redox depletions with chroma of 2 or less. They could see no reason. This was an additional item that came up. They could see no reason why these two should be defined differently. And I will defer for comment to any of you right now that have some experience or have some feelings about this particular part of the issue we're discussing. D. I see. your
I
hand.
will say I don't have a whole lot of experience, but since we discussed this yesterday, I did go and look at the rationale for soil taxonomy, and Guy Smith does speak to the differences in the control sections for aquatic subgroups. And he says some stuff, but then basically he says, I suppose primarily that these differences exist because the definitions were written in different parts of the country. Correlators in cooler sections of the country are concerned with the low chroma models because it shortens the growing season, and vice versa in the southern parts of the country. So when the people want to go and submit a proposal to make the wording the same, they may want to consider that as they craft that. Just always like to go to the source and see what the reasonings were way back when.
Right. Any others? Raise your hand or start talking.
Well, Dee brings up a really good point. The problem is the subgroup modifier for alpha sols and ultrasols has been different since soil taxonomy came out in 1975. So this would carry through too many series concepts and the way things are correlated and mapped and classified. You can't just change one. You would have to go through and rework the system. You'd have to look at every official series description and see how they'd be split out. I think Guy Smith says it's a regional difference, and it's something we've lived with for 40 years, for going on 50 years.
Good comment. And this is a possible new proposal. It needs a sponsor. It needs somebody to write it up if it's what needs to be done, and it needs to go through the complete review process like we're doing now for these other 6 proposals. So. I'll say this and get it out of the way. Any other comments on the Fragiudolts, oxyaquid Fragiudolts proposal? We had decided that it was ready to go, that it was ready to be approved. Does anybody feel otherwise or have any comments about it? This is another one we could make a decision on by consensus. I'm going to close the screen on this special meeting, and I'm going to try to bring up a pertinent map. I'll have to drag my invite to the meeting over on this side. Get to it. I tried to package all of the information that went along with this proposal inside of the invite for today, so that those of you that were going to participate can find it. And I'm having a little challenge jockeying with this, moving it around so that I can get to it. Oh, here it is. I was going to show you the extent of the Fragiudolts. This is all Fragiudolts in the U.S. Hopefully it'll open up for me. The question is sometimes where it opens up at. And it appears to be all opening up on the left, my left-hand screen. Can you see this map?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's all the Fragiudolts in the U.S. full extent. Now the Fragiudalfs, there's a lot of them along the Mississippi River terraces because they're formed in loess deposits. They don't show on here, but pretty extensive in the eastern half of the U.S. I just wanted to make sure you got a chance to see that. This is something different we've done than in the past. We're actually using G Surgo And Chad Ferguson is the one who's produced some of the maps we've used like this with this black background showing the extent in blue. You'll see one later on the aquasols. And this is a lot better than just giving a list of the states. Lets you give you a better idea of exactly where the different tax are correlated. So we'll continue to do this in the future. We may try to produce it for all the proposals if we can get it done in time before the national meeting. We find it pretty useful. Okay, now I can move this out. A lot of screen jockeying going on here. Okay. Now, the next proposal we have is this one on, so I made the assumption that that we have a consensus on this oxyaquic subgroup, not on the second part of it, but on the proposal itself, that it should be approved. Is that correct? If you have a reason to not go along with the group, just raise your hand right now. And it's perfectly fine if you do. Okay, so we'll assume we have a consensus on the oxyaquic subgroups. Organic soil materials, let me see if I can get these up on the screen. And I will need to increase the size of this view. This is a PDF document, so the way you expand the size of it is different. Does anybody know?
Yes, you're just gonna, there's the plus and minus right to the left of where you are right now.
Okay,
There you go.
makes sense. Too easy. If it was a snake, it would have bit me. Okay. This proposal on isotic mineralogy, and actually I've got a screenshot of the extent of these also, and I will show this the screenshot of the extent immediately after I just introduce you to this one. Isotic mineralogy class was set up, I believe, in the West. It was set up for soils with andic soil properties that were or andic materials that had been weathered significantly, and weathered in such that you couldn't necessarily identify them as easily as you could unweathered less weathered andic materials. And the issue here is that the proposal is that the isotic mineralogy class has been classified, has been correlated in some soils that it wasn't intended for, some spodosols in the east, and I think in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, also in spodosols with higher organic matter. And they classified just like the soils that formed in andic materials in the West as being isotic mineralogy, and that was never the intention. And there was also a question about what the significance as far as interpretations and uses management is for having the isotic mineralogy class. And the proposal is actually that this class needs to be studied to see if its criteria can be redefined so that it's more definitive, that it excludes areas that excludes soils that weren't intended to be included. And if that can't be done, that it should be done away with altogether. Now, I've heard two different people from the West, one say that, no, we need to keep this class, and another say they're all for removing it from taxonomy. So the two alternatives that they give in the proposal here are valid. And I will leave any other discussion on this to y'all. I'd like to hear what you have to say about it, some of you that have read the proposal. And while any of you are talking, I'll see if I can find the map of the extent. Go ahead and speak now. Joey, you had some knowledge about this. Do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, this was discussed before. It was discussed at the North Carolina when Dave hosted the National Cooperative Soil Survey Conference here several years back. But it's kind of not surprising that there is a continuum with these andic dysphotic materials because they do share some similarities. When the sodium fluoride criteria was established to characterize some of these spodic materials as well, it wasn't just necessarily the andic materials. It's also not surprising that in the Appalachians, with all the podsilization, that it would probably capture a little bit of that material as well. I think, Wayne, what we had decided, right, because what in my opinion, what needs to be done is now that we know what fits the sodium fluoride criteria with regards to this class, now let's look at the lab data and just see what we're capturing chemically from a mineralogical and other chemical standpoint. So it needs to go back to research, I think, to really capture what we're getting with regards to that criteria, and then from there make a better informed decision.
You've refreshed my memory. That's exactly what I remember now from our former discussions, and I think that's probably the best way to move. I'm having trouble finding that particular map. So in the interest of time, I would say that based on your comments, Joey, and what we had talked about before, we don't have anybody to support this particular proposal as a sponsor. I don't think it needs to be rejected. That's not an option. It's not really ready to approve, but it's more like this B, return to author with suggestions that you just made. Does everybody agree with that, or is there anybody that doesn't agree with that as a consensus determination? That we make some recommendations that it be researched.
Sounds logical.
Okay. Any others? Joey and I will, on any of these that have recommendations or suggestions, this won't be to the author because the authors aren't working for us anymore. They've all retired. We'll put together a proposal with some recommendations on how this will be handled, just like Joey mentioned to us a while ago.
Well, I hope Joey remembers Asheville better than I do, but there are 26 official series descriptions just in the Southern Blue Ridge in North Carolina that are isotic mineralogy, and they're all high organic matter, humu depths, and things like that. So it's more than just the West. It probably needs to be looked at nationally.
Yes. And if I could show you the map, I could show you where those are. But I'm having a little trouble finding it. A lot of screens I'm working with here. If I find it later, I will show it to you in the meeting.
Wayne, Matt posted a journal article that also might be helpful to whoever's going to end up reviewing this. He put it in the chat box. You might just want to copy that link into your Word document here so you have it to forward on as part of your recommendation for review.
Okay, let me see if I can find that. You just, it's in the chat box. And I'm challenged on that. Joey, can you get it out of the chat box and put it onto your computer so we don't lose it?
I'll send it to you in my email to you for afterwards.
Okay, that'll be great. Okay, I kind of got out of order here. I was actually supposed to go to the organic soil materials, but I guess I got focused on that map and got out of order. But that's fine. We'll assume that we have a consensus on the Isotic mineralogy, and Joey and I will work out the wording for the recommendations and the status and have those ready for the business meeting to report. Organic soil materials. This is a proposal that Mark Stolt and others are have proposed. I'll bring it up. That's not it. I believe this is the one. Yes. Is that the view expanded enough so that you can all see it? Mark Stolt, Rob Tunstead, Tony Jenkins, a whole bunch of people are sponsors of this particular proposal. Our committee took a look at it. And Joey, do you have enough remembrance about this one that you could tell us the gist of what this one is about? It was about eliminating, I remember it was about eliminating a certain criteria for organic soil materials because nobody really ever uses it.
Yeah, it's that pyrophosphate color criteria. And based on the discussions that I've been in and through, what Mark has suggested with this proposal, we know of nobody that's ever used that criteria. Most people just use the rub fiber. So,
Right.
Based on that, it just seems, it seems unnecessary to keep it in.
You hit the nail right on the head. I can remember now that discussion. And so the proposed resolution is to find fiber chemic and saprock materials based on rub fiber content only. It's a real simple proposal. And we had decided before that it was a slam dunk and it should go forward. Does anybody feel any different? Well, hearing only crickets, we'll assume that our former decision was correct and we'll consider this one approved. Simplifying the Moloch epipedon. This is one that John Galbraith and Mickey Ransom put together and have been working on for several years. And just in the time that I've been working with them on it in the last 4 years, I guess, we've gone back and forth on the criteria. Let me see if I can get the right one open. Nope, that's not it. Yeah, here it is. Second time tries the charm. John Galbraith and Mickey Ransom have worked on this several years, like I said before. I think they finally hit the nail on the head, and as far as simplifying the definition of the Moloch epipedon, there were some concerns that we had and some concerns that others had about in reducing some of the complexity of the Moloch epipedon. We would have had to reclassify a bunch of series that we think into other orders that now have Moloch epipedons with current taxonomy. And I think the group decided that they've sufficiently resolved all the issues of the past. Is there anybody that has some familiarity with this proposal that thinks otherwise? Are there any concerns that any of you have about this proposal? molic's still a molic, but the depths and that gradational depth that we used to have in there has been removed so that it's simpler to determine. And just looking at the soils in our region, I felt like that the current proposal won't have an effect on changing the classification of very many of our mollisols. It's just going to be some of the ones that were barely made it anyway, using that sliding scale for depth.
Where, can you show that sliding scale again?
Well, I'd have to bring up current taxonomy, I guess.
Oh, okay, I
but I
thought
can-
there was something in there, sorry.
There is some information in here. Joey, do you know exactly where that would be, or anybody else?
I think the top of the proposal is actually has the current criteria if you go back, but it's basically it's 18 to 25 based on 1/3 to the depth of the solum or
Mhm.
diagnostic horizon. So you got those, if you have 60 centimeters to the bottom of a canopy, you'll need 20 centimeters of thickness and that kind of thing. It was just a little bit cumbersome to work through, but I think, yeah, there it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, that would be the old criteria, right?
Right. That's the
For the-
sliding
for the
scale. Now it's
current
not there anymore.
Wayne,
So,
this
yeah.
is Susan.
Susan, go ahead.
I would just like to really say something to John. That really appreciate that he listened a year ago when we were discussing this proposal, and they had the tenumolic epipedon also proposed. But he really listened to soil scientists from especially Central Texas that were getting some heartburn over how they were going to have to split soil series. So it was just a real example of listening to field soil scientists and adapting the proposal based on their comments. So thank you, John.
Yeah, John couldn't be with us today. He's in Iceland. And I agree with your comments, Susan. He did listen to what we had to say and responded to it. And well, he and Mickey Ransom responded to it in a very, very good way. Does anybody else have any other comments, yay or nay, about the current proposal?
Could I just ask a question about it? I
Sure.
know 2 years ago when we discussed this at the regional conference, there was that concern about the number of series being impacted, with the changes. So because the tenumolic has been removed from this proposal, has that helped to reduce the need for splitting series and so forth?
It does for us in Region 9. I'm not sure about other regions, but we're only looking at maybe a handful of series that would change classification, and they were the ones that were just very minimal molics anyway, as far as thickness.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments or questions on this one? Of course, this is not the last time this will be discussed. It'll be discussed at the other regional conferences. We'll send our comments to them. They'll be subsequent to this one. And then you've got the national conference too. And you've got the time to study these real closely between now and the national conference. And so there's plenty of time to scrutinize these even more. We're not the final say-so. Okay, do we have a consensus then? It looks like to let this one be approved and move forward. Doesn't appear to be any heartburn voice so far. Okay. We've already discussed the isotic mineralogy and sandy soils. I don't think we've missed any so far. Isotic mineralogy and sandy soils is one of the ones that will have some comments to go along with it. Okay, well, I guess we're ready for wet soil order, aquasol order proposal. Let me bring it up so we can see it. We've got some accessory information. If I can, maybe I'll start out with putting that on the screen before I get into the actual proposal itself. Assuming I can get all this working. We have a map of the aquasols without aquasols, pronouncing it the way they want us to, that I'd like to show you. My Zoom screen's getting in the way of me doing it. Okay. Bear with me, here it comes. Well, I thought for sure I had that. Oh, no wonder. I had included it with the agenda and also included it on that invite. So all I've got to do is scroll down. This map was produced by Chad Ferguson at the National Soil Survey Center at mine and D. Peterson's request. It lists all major components in the USA in map units that have AQU in the suborder. They're also were sorted out by series, taxon above family, taxadjunct family, variant, and miscellaneous areas. There's quite a few miscellaneous areas that actually have classification on them. That's not supposed to be the case, but they may be special situations where they should be soils, but they're named as miscellaneous areas right now. And we'll also have a spreadsheet on these. But you can see they're fairly extensive in the USA, especially when you include some of the miscellaneous areas out here that probably shouldn't be there. But this looks more extensive than the analog map that you sent us, Joey. It's certainly got a lot more detail in it than that analog map of soil orders for the USA. So it potentially has quite a bit of impact for the United States. And this is only the CONUS. It doesn't include Alaska, and Puerto Rico, and the other islands. I didn't think about requesting that when I requested this map. First time we did it, you learn things. Did all of you expect it to be this extensive? We'll get to the proposal itself, and then I've tried to consolidate the comments that we had on the proposal, but we'll take a look at the proposal itself first. I see we haven't spent quite an hour on this so far.
You're doing great, Wayne.
Don't let me rush you though. Okay, this is a new order for wet soils. The wet soil order includes both the subaqueous soils and the soils that are in aquic suborders right now. And I asked Mark Stolt, he's one of the sponsors. You can see Rob Fitzpatrick, Corny Van Hustine, Dr. Dave Limbo, Jeremiah Parsley, Martin Ravenhorst, Matt Ricker, Peter Shad, Mark Stolt, Jim Thompson, Dan Wing, Curtis Monger was their advisor, moderator, and arbitrator. They put this proposal together over a period of years. It started out in either ICOMAC or ICOM-SAS, which I guess now includes not only includes subaqueous and aquic soils. Before it was ICOMAC, and it just included aquasols. Well, it just included the aquasols or aquatic conditions. But then the subaqueous soils have come into the picture and become part of taxonomy. So now it includes both. From a personal communication that I passed on to all the committee members, we asked specifically if any of the subgroups that are aquatic would be affected by this proposal, and the answer was no. That the current aquatic subgroups would stay as they are under this proposal, and it's those that are in the aquatic suborders that would move to the aquasol order if this proposal is accepted and instituted. We had not a lot of discussion about this particular proposal. We actually thought it was ready to go forward until we had a meeting yesterday, a special meeting, and a lot of people gave their thoughts and feelings about this proposal and their concerns. And we have a list of those. I don't know that I can do justice to describe the whole proposal in just a few words. Joey, would you like to give us a short summary, or anybody else, on what the proposal is about? Maybe things that I haven't already said before we take a look at any concerns.
No, Wayne, I think, it's probably a little too much to try to condense and compile. I mean, if people are interested, they can certainly read the proposal. I was not on ICMSAS, so
Yeah.
From that standpoint, but
well, one of the significant changes in this classification from what the aquatic suborders are is there's a change in the depth that is required for aquatic conditions. It's 0 to 30 centimeters, and in the aquatic suborders, correct me any of y'all if I'm wrong, in the aquatic suborders, it's either 40 or 50 centimeters. And then of course the aquatic subgroups are even deeper depths than that, because they don't have to be wet as close to the surface. But that in itself, changing the depth criteria, as Joey and I discussed earlier today, that in itself could have the effect of some soils that are in aquatic suborders right now might not be wet enough to qualify for aquasols. Let me show you some, as I can get to it here, some background information. I produced a spreadsheet from the extent map that I just showed you. And it's based on the same information, same source of information as GSERGO, which is a rasterized SERGO information, the official soil survey information, but it's quicker because it's rasterized to produce a national map. And there might have been another way to do this, but I went through the list that Chad sent me of all the components, soil components of map units in the US that were in AQU suborders. AQU is a prefix. And I've got I'm hearing what you said earlier. I'm going to expand the view of this so you can see it some kind of way.
Wayne, I might have missed it too, but just so you know, Christina asked a question in the chat
Okay.
about subaqueous soils.
Okay, go ahead and ask that question while I'm getting this set up.
So for this order, because I've spent most of my time helping out with the artisols, was this order or this new order for the purpose of the subaqueous, like the coastal zone soil surveys? Was that the original intent to classify soils like that? Or no?
Well, I've heard different stories about it. I originally thought that you know, the classification of subaqueous soils came before this proposal. This proposal was first presented to me, I guess, or I first heard about it, and was with Joe Parsley, who was actually working on the proposal a few years ago. And it was my understanding that we already had the classification for the subaqueous soils. And this was an attempt to bring them together into one order with the aquatic suborders that we currently have. Does anybody refute that? I'm not saying that's true, but necessarily, but that's my best knowledge. Does that answer the question for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could add a little bit to that.
Okay.
So, you know, the subaqueous soils were incorporated into the other soils with the WAS suborders, you know, so they were incorporated into taxonomy. But I do think, in thinking back, initially the concept was to carve those out, and then it became a little bit more comprehensive over time with a lot of different rationales as to why, you know, and clearly, you know, this can be discussed either ways, but you know, the WRB, the other international system, also separates their poorly drained soils out and very poorly drained soils out. So I think, Christy, to your point, I think it started with that discussion, but quickly became a little bit more comprehensive.
I can buy that, Joey. Sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
This is a spreadsheet I produced. Took about a half a day to do it. Taking the data for all the components that had AQU as a prefix in the suborder classification for the whole CONUS of the USA, not the whole USA, including Alaska. I don't know how many aquatic suborders they have in Alaska, but I assume they might have some. There were actually, I look at the stats, there were 3,136 when I got through cleaning it up. Most of the time was spent cleaning up the data so that things like Eric calciaquols, which was the name of some of the components, unnamed 13 and unnamed 2, those kind of things were extricated. And then I also, on these ones that are yellow, the components were classified two or three different ways, or they had 2 or 3 different names but the same classification, or 2 or 3 different names with different classification. And I had to consolidate those so that I could come out with a unique list of the series that might need to be reclassified at the suborder level that had AQU in the suborder to aquasols. Now, the analysis I did not do was based on the change in depth to aqua conditions to 30 centimeters from 40 or 50 that it is now. I did not do the analysis to determine which aquatic suborders may not qualify for aquasols. Joey and I talked about that. Like I said earlier, we believe we have that straight in our minds. There may be some where we have a shallower depth that you have to have aquatic conditions. It's logical that if the current criteria has a deeper depth, that there would be some that would not qualify as aquasols that are currently aquatic suborders. And along with that, we'll discuss some of the other comments if that happens, if there are some series that do not qualify for aquasols under the new soil order definition, Joey felt like that they would fall into the most into the closest subgroup, fall into a subgroup that's not supposed to be changed with this order. So we'll get into that a little deeper with the next frame. Any questions about the stats? I didn't mention that there's 48,106 components, and that's just major components. That doesn't include minor components that someday would need to be reclassified. The way we handle component classification is we don't go in there without a purpose and just change all the classifications to the current classification. Because in some cases, they may be variants, they may be tax adjuncts, they might have been classified under old criteria, and changing them to the new classification might not be appropriate for all components. So this is not really a workload here, an immediate workload if the proposal goes through. The changes in the series would be an immediate workload as soon as the proposal is accepted and published. Published in Taxonomy are the keys. Any questions about the stats so far? Okay, well, I'll get those out of the way, and I will try to bring up the comments unless there are other questions about the proposal itself. I still have that up on the screen.
One anecdotal comment I'll make, we were talking about this morning. I should probably know this, but I'm not sure which order has the most series. I guess we're about 25,000 series with 12 existing, but 3,000 is going to, I would think Inceptisol might be the highest. I don't know, but Mollisol is probably pretty high too, but that's going to put it as one of the most populous orders from a series standpoint, certainly.
I'm curious about the implications in terms of interpretation. Would the new soil order streamline interps, or how would that impact, instead of just, of course, changing series, taxa, and so forth, how would that change interpretations, or would it?
And would this one fall out? I guess this would fall out first, right? So because more of those series would be changed, fall into a different order then?
Matt, this is Dee. I have just a comment to your question that most interpretations actually look at the soil property. So just changing the taxonomy won't necessarily change the ratings that you get for interpretations. It changes the way things are classified.
Okay, thank you.
The only and Bob Dobos would have to do a search, or Richard Reed would have to do a search through our taxonomic, or through our interpretive criteria. But if ACWIC subgroups, if ACWIC suborder is used anywhere in the criteria for any national or local interps would be those for the states. If AQU is used as criteria for any type of soil interpretation, it could affect the output if there was a change. If something that was an ACWIC suborder did not make the aquasol order, then there would be a change once that classification change was made in NRCS, and then it was used to generate interpretation. That's the only situation that I know of that it would have a direct effect, because we wouldn't, if we change the classification, we don't necessarily change any of the data other than classification that would be used for interpretations like soil properties and qualities that are populated in NRCS.
That's a good point, Wayne.
Okay, let me see if I can get the right comments up on the screen. I had several, and I consolidated those.
Nope, that's not it, Wayne.
That's not it. No, I know where it is. Because I just created it this morning.
I think it's is it the PDF?
No, I
No,
think it's this one. I think it's the.
no,
Oh,
not
that's
that one either.
Steve Lawrence.
Right.
I'll get to it. Yeah, bear with me. Because I attached them to the invite from this morning, and it seems to have disappeared.
You did. And you did a nice job.
Does anybody have that they can bring up and share right now? And while I'm looking, it may be quicker than me. That would be a 6-8.
I don't see it in the team, well, that's the Teams one. No, that's the Zoom one. I
Let me
don't
look
see
for
it in
it
that
too.
group.
Oh, I think it's right here. Yeah, it's a 6-8. Yeah, here it is. They're
There you
numbered,
go.
17 items. And you know, to be truthful, we did this. There was a lot of deliberation on the issues and concerns by several members of the committee, and a pretty intense discussion yesterday afternoon. This was an attempt to consolidate those, and a lot of y'all sent me information this morning that consolidated the comments. And we're not absolutely sure that each one of these is even valid. There may be a few that can be answered by somebody like Mark that has familiarity with the order proposal, Aquasol order proposal, that he'll say, well, that's really not an issue. We took care of that, or the proposal doesn't affect that particular item. But I think it'd be worth our while, since this is the one with the most comments, to go down through these, and we have plenty of time. Number one was actually a comment that the Aquasol's proposal is a very significant proposal for change with merit towards achieving international similarity in soil taxonomy for the USA and other countries. It's a huge undertaking, since it can affect most of, if not all, the existing orders. Right now, there are ACWIC suborders in most of the orders. Some committee members really like the idea of having wet soils at the order level, but have concerns about the implementation. It's a big enough change that there are concerns about, well, where are the soils that I work with going to end up? As outlined in Title 430 of the National Soil Survey Handbook, any proposed amendment to soil taxonomy should include a justification of rationale for the proposed changes, and analysis of how the proposed changes are an improvement to soil survey maps, data, and descriptions relative to use and management, soil, or improvements to soil science procedures and processes in general. That's in quotes. Several of the members of the committee feel there is more work to be done in this area. It's not that they haven't identified these, but there's more information or clarification needed to convince at least a lot of the folks that are on the committee and that commented here. The Aquasol order proposal apparently eliminates endosaturation and episaturation currently at the grade group level, along with anthric saturation currently at the subgroup level. The committee is not aware of any explanation or justification that is provided for this change, or how removal of these categories from soil taxonomy is an improvement. Any comments on any of these so far? Okay, well, I'll keep going.
I'm really glad that people think so in depth on this. I mean, you could tell you guys have really worked hard on this.
Well, there's
Lots
been a
more
lot-
people, more brighter than me, I think really hard about this. So
There has been a lot of intense thought about the effect of this proposal, and it's because of their concern about the science.
mhm.
And it's been mostly individual efforts that were brought together. I know Dee and Georgia brought together all the, and her region, all the soil scientists that she could, that were willing to comment. And we just consolidated those this morning. The selection of the 30 centimeter depth criterion for aquic conditions changes the concept for wet soils from aquic suborders currently defined. This 30 centimeter depth requirement changes the depths of 40 to 50 centimeters or 50 centimeter depths for aquic conditions in depth aquic conditions in aquic suborders right now. It's assumed some or many series that are now aquic AQU suborders will classify into existing aquics, that's where it's spelled wrong, aquic subgroups. The committee would like to know which series and their taxonomic classifications are affected this way. In other words, we'd like to know, by changing the depth criteria, which series will no longer be aquic suborders and will have to fall into aquic subgroups. It may be asking for something that's at least challenging, but could be very difficult to and time consuming to produce. But this would be one way, as one of the members said, one way of selling the idea of aquasols to the soil scientists in the USA.
So then like a typic endoaqual, for example, would potentially be a new order.
It would
Potentially. Yep.
And then I guess you kind of lose the detail of,
That's what's implied. That's what we think.
yeah, because I mean, looking at Illinois, all those mollisols could be aquasol. So, and then I guess an aquasol, then are there going to be required, like, could they have, well, I guess there'd be a wet mollisol, aquasol, I don't know. I just wonder, like, if there'd still be a molic epipedon or whatever, or if all that would get broken out. I'm assuming it would.
I think most of the suborders are in the aquasol order proposal. Most of what's at the suborder level gets captured there. Whether the great group, all that gets captured or not, you know, there's so many categories, it's really hard to determine, but I think they've pretty thoroughly gone through and captured most of them. One of the ones that we'll get to a little later in this summary is spodosol not being captured. So that's this one. This is the big one right here. Maybe hard to get a grasp on, but we'd like to know which series and what their taxonomic classification is going to be, where this depth is changed. There's obviously going to be some that won't be aquasols anymore. They won't be aquasols, and therefore won't be in the group that we now consider aquic subgroups. It's just a kind of an unknown. And when changes in taxonomy occur, we don't like unknowns. It's assumed that aquic subgroup criteria will not change, and the variable.
Wayne, I don't mean to interrupt you. This is Dee again, but I wanted to just make a comment about that number 6, the 30 centimeter depth, which we discussed a little bit yesterday, and somebody
Yes.
suggested that 30 centimeters came from the hydric soils indicators, and I believe that probably is where they chose that. So then folks need to, as they think about this, they need to think about whether they think that's a good idea to use those indicators, depths within the larger body of soil taxonomy.
I think
I just wanted to emphasize that a little bit.
my
Thank you, Dee.
initial reaction is that indicators need to be developed from the soils and not the other way around.
No, indicators are interpretations. Those are,
Right.
so
Well, I think if I remember right, I think in this case of the 30 centimeter depth, you may know something about this, Joey, or any of the rest of you. I think that's also some international criteria. And maybe the one of the most important reasons for using that 30 centimeter depth. I could be wrong.
No, I think that may be right, Wayne.
Okay. Okay, we'll move to the next one. Thank you for those comments, and interrupt at any time. We got plenty of time to go through this, and we want to get it right. It's
Well,
assumed that
Wayne, I think
Yes.
that we're all having questions about this 30 centimeter depth, and it's not addressed at all in the proposal. It's just thrown out there as 30 centimeters. So that's part of where the, things that we're discussing, if you look at previous proposals that we just reviewed today, like simplifying the Moloch epipedon, there's a lot more explanation, justification, rationale, and we don't have that in this proposal. And so we're walking away with more questions still, like this 30 centimeter, whether it's related to hydric, whether it's related to WRB, we don't know.
okay. Does this last sentence I just typed on here capture that thought?
Yeah, maybe just highlight it so they know that we still have questions about it. So it's easy for them to navigate to that that's a question.
Okay, good comment. This is one of the crucial issues because it changes the concept of what a wet soil is in the U.S. It's assumed that aquic subgroup criteria will not change in the variable depths, like I mentioned before, for aquic conditions and aquic and related subgroups will still be appropriate considering item 5 above. In other words, if you change to a 30 centimeter depth from 40 or 50, well, are the aquic subgroups still going to be appropriate at their depths? Seems like they would be, but at the very least, we'd like the soil scientists in the nation to be aware of this.
I would highlight that last one too.
And just for information, I just checked the WRB real quick, and glaze soils are 40 centimeters and stagnant soils are 50 centimeters. So it is not consistent with WRB. So it must be from the hydric soil criteria.
you could ask that directly.
Does that capture it, at least in a nutshell? We can refine it some more between now and the business meeting if we need to.
Well, you could add that it seems to be in line with the hydric soil criteria and just have them speak to whether it is or not. Maybe.
I've always considered hydric the soil criteria to be something that we did separate, and that taxonomy is only a guide to assigning hydric soil status on a paper list.
Yeah. Yep.
And hydric soil determinations are actually made in the field, looking at the soil and hydrology and all the other factors.
Yes,
Yeah, it's in the criteria,
yes.
but not in the delineation.
Okay. As aquic and related subgroups indicate aquic conditions for some time in normal years are artificially drained as a requirement, one would assume that some or all of these soils will classify as aquasols rather than septisols, inasols, mollisols, etc., under which they currently classify. We could use some clarification on how drained soils would be handled in aquasols. That seemed to be another area where we had concerns. Am I remembering correctly on that?
This is D again. I think that the idea, and y'all tell me if I'm wrong, but the idea drained versus undrained was one of the items that they put early on in the proposal as support. And they even went so far as to say that they thought if Guy Smith if we would have considered a wet soil order, if draining were not a possibility, but if you actually read the rest of his response, from which they pulled the information that they included in the proposal, it goes on to say that Guy Smith was not in favor of what he called an aquic order. He was actually not in favor of aquic suborders. He would have liked to have seen aquic separated at the great group level instead of the suborder or the subgroup. So I actually think it seems like what they included in the proposal as a reason for having a wet soil order actually was taken out of context.
Okay, thank you for that comment. I remember hearing some comments about drained soils, and that related to aquasols and wet soils. And I was remembering what a technician who was a Korean War veteran in Pleasanton, Atascosa County, Texas, when I was at Uvalde as an area soil scientist, he said, there aren't any wetlands left in Atascosa County because I drained them all in my career. And there's nothing to keep a landowner from draining a wetland nowadays, unless it's the waters of the United States. If you have a depression on your own place, it's not connected to anything, and you don't have any government money that you're accepting or any programs that you're participating in. You can, as I understand it, you can still drain a wetland and get by with it without going to jail or getting fined or losing any kind of payment. But that's just a side story. The authors need to provide all information possible to sell this proposal to many of us. This was a comment from Rick Livingston. And it goes along with the other things that have been mentioned so far, that if you're going to sell this proposal so that we can accept it, there's all the items above and some of the items below will need to be dealt with in a way that we can feel comfortable. The authors need to provide, one of the ways to sell this proposal is to crosswalk current taxonomic classes that have AQU in them in any level of classification to the taxonomic classification we will have with the aquasols proposal. May be very challenging to do this. Do all of you get what we're saying here? This was another conversation with Rick. He felt like that we needed to know the disposition of all the active subgroups and all the active suborders, and any of the great groups related to that, what they're going to be in the Aquasol's proposal. If we knew that, it would be easier to accept. Anybody disagree?
Why
with
would
that?
you want to do that, Wayne? Why would you want to crosswalk everything that's AQU at any level of classification to Aquasols? Why would you want to do that?
Well, if you did it at the suborder level, it would tell you which ones aren't going to make Aquasol. And you would
But
know.
this is at any, you're saying
would-
it down to the subgroup level.
Well, at the subgroup level, it may not be as useful because maybe I should just change that.
The aquatic subgroups that I've looked at do not make aquasols, but that's not to say that others may not. And some of the aquatic suborders, if you look at the OSD typifying pedons, they don't make aquasols, but others do. So it's a really tricky kind of separation.
Mhm. So the way it's stated here now, taking the subgroups out, was that if we crosswalked all the subgroups to what they would be in the Aquasol's proposal, is that going to identify? Is that going to identify the series that will, really change in concept? The aquid suborders right now is how we identify the wet soil, and that would change in the Aquasol's proposal. They would have to, if you have to meet the requirements of that order, in order to be an Aquasol. I'm not sure that this particular item could be done without looking at each specific series. What do you think, Dee?
I think you're pretty, I think that's a good statement, Wayne.
Okay, well,
I've looked at more this morning and there's more I want to look at, The more I look, the more I'm like, well, I wonder.
well, it's like it's like with Congress. We don't want to have to pass the bill to find out what's in it. It's a similar situation. We'd like to know on a big proposal like this, a significant proposal, that what we're going to get before we get it.
Yes.
Number 11, we have the series identified that currently classify in AQU suborders, but not the series that are currently AQU suborders that don't meet that 30 centimeter requirement. Well, that may be repeating what the latter could be a significant change in series concepts for wetness. I guess we really already discussed that, and Joey and I will sort that out in our final comments. Number 12, the loss of spotic distinction for soils like, how do you pronounce that, Dee? Mascot? Or Mascotti?
Mascotti.
Which is mapped in large extent in Georgia, currently classified as ultic aliquods. The new classification would be Arenic Palearchax, since there is no spotic great group or subgroup for Argax. Recommend maintaining this distinction.
This soil's also mapped a good bit in Florida, in the Atlantic coast flatwoods of Florida too. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, evidently, I noticed the other subgroups, the other orders are mentioned at the suborder or great group level in the Aquasol's proposal, but for some reason spotosols was left out. Is that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the Argax. I don't know if I like it.
Well, you got a lot of them.
I know Argax.
Okay,
Would roll off the tongue.
okay, that's a good concern or issue to be resolved. No distinction between wet alpha soils and ultrasols. Wet soils from each of these orders will become argax. Wet soils with an argillic horizon. Recommend maintaining distinction between current alpha soils and ultrasols. I haven't put a lot of thought into this one. Does anybody that has want to comment further?
Well, it seems like it's almost, yeah, because I mean, at least with alpha sols and ultrasols, I mean, you can visually see differences, but like if you get rid of that, there is none, and unless you just do base saturation, but then that's going to require, a lab test. But I guess does it not, with this order, does it not matter? Are they saying that the wetness is the overriding factor for both?
It seems so. Just looking at the comment itself, another alternative would be to have, alfax or argax and ultax. That would make the distinction, wouldn't it, between alpha sols and ultrasols?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a little bit inconsistent because you will have some alpha sols and ultrasols, but I guess a distinction that only really matters if they're not wet. I don't know.
That may have been the assumption. We could use some clarification.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Wayne, this is it. I think there does need to be, in alpha soils and just alpha soils in general, we tend to see those as croppable soils. Multisols, not necessarily because of base saturation pH in the long run. And it may be that there is a distinction we have over here where in the lower Mississippi Valley, we would have dominantly, we would have alpha soils there versus coastal plain, which would be ultrasols dominantly.
So does this last statement kind of capture that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yes, yep.
Okay. Okay, good. Item 14, there's currently no abundance requirement for plinthic subgroups. The proposal says that have plinthic within 200 centimeters of the surface. I'll change the wording here a little bit. I think this would.
They just don't have the 5%. They don't have any sort of abundance requirements in their proposal. They just say soils that have plinthite within 200 centimeters of the mineral soil surface. So
Right.
if you got 1 or 2%, that would, that would make it. Whereas that's not the way it, there are a lot of soils down here that have a little bit of plinthite.
Right.
So-
I've seen them here in Texas too.
Yeah. So they should address that abundance issue.
Yeah. So that's one of our recommendations. And this one came from Steve Lawrence originally, or was that you?
I think it was both of us, but he
Okay,
had
good.
it in his document, actually.
We like to see collaboration.
Oh, yeah. Steve and I talk all the time when we're both in the office.
Okay, item 14, taken care of. Item 15, only got 3 more to go. In the 2014 Keys to Soil Taxonomy, Albic subgroups of ultrasols and alpha sols required an abrupt textural change. And I guess you could say it doesn't have to be past tense, it's present tense, because we haven't gotten the new Keys taxonomy out yet. Change in addition to the albic horizon. This aquasol proposal does not mention the abrupt textural change, but only requires the presence of an albic horizon within 100 centimeters of the mineral surface to be albargax.
I don't like it. I don't like that name. No, keep going.
Yeah, would
I'm not recommending
out.
changing it. I'm just being a brat and saying it.
Okay.
It's hard to say. It's just weird.
Right.
Alborgax. I don't know.
Yeah, that'll get us tongue tied. Recommend maintaining the abrupt textual change criterion. Any comments on that?
I mean, again, I feel like this is, it just seems, I don't know if wetness is given too much of a weight over everything. I don't, and I don't, yeah, I don't know how to say it. It just seems like, I know if it's wet, I know it's important, but it just seems like there's other considerations aren't being made as to why things are classified into certain orders.
You feel like we're losing some information.
Yeah, I feel like it. And I'm not against change, I suppose. One, I don't, alborgax, I don't like that, but it just, I'm concerned as if, I don't know if the intention would be to have all these series now. I mean, because it's going to require people to go and reclassify, which it's not a bad thing, but you know, now endosaturation, episaturation doesn't matter, and base saturation isn't really considered. It just seems like there's going to be a lot of, you know, I don't know if it was factored in or considered as much, maybe it should have been, but the loss of detail is just concerning for me.
Yes,
Let me,
not
let
only
me,
for you, Christine.
No, I know, I'm just speaking for myself.
I
Yeah.
agree.
And I have not been involved in this soil order. I've been in most of the discussions with the artisols. So, you know, I am coming in a little bit late, but
let me ask you all this, Dee and Christine, do you all use the epi and endo in any of the interpretive? I know you don't use taxonomy per se, and you go on properties, but does that affect anything? I mean, we understand what it means from a hydrology, drainage, that kind of standpoint, but how do you use that information?
Well, I think it's mostly used, you know, in the case of interpretations, Bob Douglas will tell you, they always try to use the population of wet, moist and dry soil layers to make interpretations for things like perch water tables,
right.
and so forth. And they try not to use the classification, but sometimes people will use classification in making interpretations. And I think in this case, it's probably when they're looking at the epi or endo classification, that tells them something, and it's a mental interpretation.
Yeah, and I
Yes.
wonder, yeah, and I guess it depends on the interpretation and how you're writing it. And but I wonder too if like interpretations related to like any type of like septics or anything, like how, if everything now, I just wonder if it's going to have a lot of like unsuitable or severely limited, or I wonder how that would fall out if we're talking about interpretations. And not to say it doesn't change the soil, it just, there might be a lot more questions, you know, a lot more questions to soil scientists about that.
Well, that's a
Christine.
good point. There's probably right now, there's probably some consistency in epi versus endo saturation. If you compare the classification to how the wet soil layers are populated in NRCS and used for interpretations, there's some consistency right now. If you take that out, you won't have taxonomy conveying the same information as the presence or absence of those water tables or wet layers. And sometimes the actual soil water status is not available to somebody making the determination. They might have access to the classification of soils, but not necessarily the population of water tables. And somebody else had a comment they wanted to make.
Yeah, this is Dara. Christine, I was thinking the same thing about, septic systems And I think, again, it's not changing the soil, like you said. And every state's a little different on how they cite for a septic system, but the properties still are the same. So it's not like they're classifying the soil. They're just looking for, depth to the concentrations and the redoxymorphic features. So I don't think it'll make a difference for that.
Well, I think you're correct. It doesn't change the soil itself. The classification kind of changes our communication of the concept of the soil and its characteristics. I've always thought of classification as kind of a shorthand that tells you what the soil's like.
Yeah, and
Yes.
I
I
don't,
also,
mean,
I'm sorry, Christy.
no, it's a stream of consciousness. Go on.
Well, I was just gonna say, I also feel like, yeah, we have some clear-cut epi and endo cases, but then there's a lot of them in between that we just put one or the other, mostly in endo, without really having the concept.
I know in Illinois, like the state soil drummer is a typic endoic wall and it's mapped everywhere. And so I just wonder in that situation, to me, making sure something stays in mollisol for lots of reasons is more important than classifying it as an aquasol because it has redox features or in whatever and shallower than 30 centimeters. I don't know. I think the overarching factor is the fact that it's a mollisol and it's highly, it's desirable. And I don't know. I just, maybe, I don't know. I'm not sold on that part of it. And a lot of the times they're drained anyway. Like everything is tiled. And I know not in Illinois, but I'm very familiar with those soils, and it's all tiled. So I don't know if it's going to be an aquasol. It just doesn't seem logical, I guess.
And in South Carolina, is that where you're at right now, Christine?
So that would be probably based on the map that would affect there's a lot of altisols in the coast, so still learning, but I think in the low country it would have an impact on those soils too. I don't believe there's anything spodec. Dee might know. I don't think we have soils with spodec characteristics.
We do.
I think you
it's a small
do, yeah.
percent. Yeah,
In the
it's like
low
country?
like 2% or something.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's small. But it'll definitely influence some of our altisols.
Your intisols, some of your
Yeah.
inceptisols.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
coast.
Dee's right. Yeah.
Yeah, the Piedmont won't be affected as much, but if at all. But down low.
It could be.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some perched where you have just the rock that rock and it's in the water sitting on top of it.
And that to me, that's not an aquasol. That's just, if it's perching water for some time, I don't know. Anyways, we've got about 12 minutes, so I don't want to belabor on all the points, but we definitely.
Well, it's just, I think a lot of people understand that you lose a lot of existing information from our current taxonomic classification system if you remove it, if you make it an AC or an OC, as I think I would.
However the heck you say it.
Yeah. Well, they say you have to say it.
Okay.
So
well,
Christine is right. We have about 12 minutes left, but there is a half-hour gap between the committee meetings. I know people need bio breaks, but I can stay on and we can keep going for about an extra 20 minutes.
We have just 2 items left, and then we'll make a consensus decision if we can, or vote on the status of this one. We've got items 16 and 17 we'll go through. I don't think it'll take too long.
Is this
Well-
Steve Lawrence? The Steve summarizes? Is that the Steve?
Correct.
Okay.
Hey, Wayne, one comment that could maybe be placed is there's concern about the loss of information, and can the lower category criteria be expanded to capture what is being lost? that is part of the discussion going on. For example, the spodec stuff that you were talking about, D, and so forth, that seems to be lost completely out of the system. There's quite a bit of that, I'm sure.
The biggest change though, Joey, that I think is at that order level. You know, if you look at a soil order map now, you see, okay, we got ultisols down in the southeast, we got mollisols up, and if you make this aquasol order, you're gonna have them everywhere. And
Right.
we all know that we have wet soils, we have not wet soils, we have dry soils. So does this actually really help? Does it help? Question mark. I'll leave the thought there. The finer scale, yeah, there are some issues with, you know, Spodic and then alpha sols, ultisols, epi and endo and all of that, but they generally seem to group out kind of the same way for the most part. But that order level is what
Yeah,
that's a big issue.
I
It
see
is.
that, but
Yeah.
the taxonomy serves a lot of different, and in my mind, this proposal is more for the landscape level. You know, if you want to map ultisols, you can map them on a postage stamp in the southeast, right? So now with aquasols, you actually might have some other things start to jump out. I mean, you know, definitely it's a scale related issue, but I see the proposal in general, based on what I read, again, I wasn't in the development, as taxonomy as a communication vehicle versus a mapping vehicle, right? And I think, you know, taxonomy was developed for both. It was developed to make soil surveys, and it was developed to be the communication of soils. And to me, this is more, this proposal is for the second part.
Right.
I wonder
Well,
if there's a way, I wonder if there's a way
perspective.
to, yeah, and I wonder if there's a way to somehow keep it towards like all those submerged, like the subaqueous soils, or if there's a way to do the wording where, because obviously those are always going to be inundated. And so, but they do support all kinds of industry and plant life. So that's my last comment on it. So we can get through them.
But from what I remember looking at the proposal, I think the subaqueous soils are separated in categories fairly clearly in the aquasol proposal.
Yeah, they'd be Wasatcs, like they're Wascents and stuff now. So
Oh, okay.
they wouldn't really be separated, you know. Still be part of another order.
Here's Steve Lawrence summarizes the foundational issue very well. The beginning of the wet soils proposal discusses the significance of wet soils to interpretations. From an interpretive perspective, it seems like a very wide range to have subaqueous soils in the same order with soils that may be much drier during a significant part of the year. Many of the current alpha sols, innosols, photosols, and ultisols in the southeast that would likely classify as aquasols under this proposal are forested.
I think he said it pretty well, what everybody's been saying.
Okay.
And then mollisols in the Midwest would be affected. So.
Okay, just let me add that statement to this.
And an epi-aqua probably would be affected, endo-aqua.
Yeah. They're mentioned above, maybe in this time, Joey and I will try to consolidate that part.
No, you could just do the mollisols, and that's fine.
Yeah.
Wayne, you might want to include a comment in the chat from Edgar somewhere too. He makes a good point.
Can you capture that, Joey, the comment from Edgar?
And he says, what did he say? There's been a couple
Hey,
comments.
Wayne. Yeah,
He said you'll lose distinction of the orders and landscapes at the order level in the lower Mississippi Valley.
Yep.
Can one
I'll
of
say,
you,
yeah, I'll say it again.
just a
Edgar
minute,
sa-
just a minute. Let me start typing right as soon as I get set. Okay, now say it to me slowly.
Edgar says you'll lose distinction
My ears must be plugged up. Please repeat it again.
You'll lose distinction
Oh,
of orders and landscapes at the order level in the lower Mississippi Valley.
I mean, would that apply not only to the lower Mississippi, but to a whole bunch of other landscapes? I mean,
Yeah, Atlantic Coast Flatwoods, Southern Coastal Plain, just all over.
coastal
So
prairie. I mean,
Wayne, would you remove the statement that says Steve Lawrence summarizes a foundational issue very well? Because all at it aren't his words, because he's not a mollisol guy or anything.
right.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. That would be a good move.
Thank you.
Okay. Will it be all right if I spell Mississippi right? M-I-S-S.
Wayne, I think there's several examples. I don't know. It's just the loss of orders and landscapes.
In many places in the US.
Yeah.
Yes.
Does that look right now?
Well, you do have a typo in 18 in many areas of the US. You forgot the N.
Oh.
Sorry, not to be the spelling and grammar police.
With the current proposal, there's a determined will lose. I'm gonna have it. Oh, May. May, and it needs to be May. Okay, if 18 is good, we'll move on to 19, and that's the last one. The previous new orders of gellosols and andisols, well, maybe I'll just say that I was taking the orders of gellosols and andisols identified a unique set of soils with specific properties associated with parent material and soil forming processes or lack thereof. This this proposal combines many different soils from various soil orders and their associated nature and properties into a new soil order based on wetness. Although they share in some part the range of what is considered wet, the importance of their inherent differences in other aspects may be diminished somewhat as a result. Does everybody comprehend what the point that's trying to be made here?
Yes.
Gellisol's keys out first. Would that necessarily apply, or am I wrong about that?
No,
Well,
you're right. The comment is just saying that sub orders that have been established relatively quote unquote recently were developed and separated based on their parent material and soil forming processes, and not just whether they were wet or not. So it kind of falls in line with number 18.
Yeah.
We lose distinction of orders and landscapes at that order level. And, if the original intent was of the proposal that got expanded, if their original thought was to say we need to separate subaqueous soils, that, I wouldn't have an issue with that because they had not previously been classified in any way. It's like the artisols. Artisols, they haven't been classified. So, okay, you want to classify them? good on you. You know, you want to classify subaqueous, okay.
And-
But
And it
this is
doesn't,
bigger than that,
And,
so.
and I almost think number 18 needs to be moved to the top and bolded and extra highlighted. Like 18 does not do it justice. You know what I'm saying? I mean, after this discussion, that's a huge one.
It is a biggie. It's
it
like
is.
biggie.
And it seems, I guess to kind of piggyback on what Dee said, that, and what that bullet point is saying is that it doesn't appear that this proposal is taking, I mean, it's not even looking at parent material, it's almost just looking at like a landscape property. And it's like a site factor almost, and having an order based on that. So it's not really looking at parent material, especially parent material, and have, you could potentially have, you know, you're gonna have till and outwash and bedrock, everything all in the same thing, and they act different. And they
Correct.
get,
I was just able to join the meeting here. So this is Mark. So I've just been able to join because I had another meeting. So I'm just turned in, and looks like you're at the end of this discussion, but
Mhm.
I guess the point is that the driving factor for all these soils is how wet they are. So it's clearly a soil property that's driving this. And that's the most important property that's essentially driving the morphology and the use and management of these soils. And so that's why people believe, and most of the people that I talked to when I was developing this proposal believe that we needed to have a soil order for wet soils. Something like 95% of the folks that I talked to at various meetings, and we actually had, what do I want to say, a voting box where it said, do you think that we need to have a soil order for wet soils? And you could write yes or no. And basically 95% of the people wrote yes. And essentially it's because the wetness is driving the use and management of those soils, and it's driving the morphology. Why does it matter if they have the same parent, don't have the same parent materials?
Well, those are some good comments, and they help justify the proposal itself, and you know, justification for the proposal is one of the things that we're concerned, and maybe because it's been a while since we heard the proposal presented. It was supposed to be presented this week at the meeting, and I guess that part of the meeting got canceled. But we're at a point where we're just about at the end of our discussion of all the proposals. We just need to decide on the status of the Aquasol's proposal. And even though we listed quite a few concerns and issues that people have with it, I think the status that we kind of have a consensus for. Let me see if I can get this up on the screen again where I can see it. I've moved so many things around that let's see here. I'll have it in just a minute. This is my last challenge for the meeting.
Anyway, I didn't get to hear any of the other comments, but I did hear the very last one that you guys were talking about. And so I did want to make that comment.
Well, we appreciate that, Mark. We're going to decide on the status on this one. If it was ready to go with no comments, we would call it approved. I think the consensus of the group is return to author with suggestions, which the way these proposals have worked in the past, That doesn't mean that it stops. That means that we're willing to work with you on resolving any of the issues that we list. Joey and I will consolidate and regurgitate those at the business meeting coming up. And we're willing to work with you. And like Dave Linbo told us last year, he said the intention of these committees is not to just meet right before the meeting and then stop. The intention is that we would work all year long to move things forward and that need to be, and work with the proposal authors to get any changes made that need to be made. So unless I'm asking the group that's here, the committee meeting group that's here today, do y'all feel like return to author with suggestions that we have listed that we just got through reviewing is the proper status to apply to this? Or does anybody have any reasons for wanting us to use another status? As it's worked in the past, we've had I think when I was working with Matt Levi on one of these regional committee meetings, we listed issues that were even fixed during the committee meetings, and they were fixed in time to move forward. I know on the artisols we had issues that caused us to return it to the author, but now here we are 2 years later, and we feel like the artisols proposal is ready to roll with any issues fixed that would come up in the next few months. So this would be the same status for Aquasol. We're ready to work with you, Mark, to get anything that needs to be fixed on the proposal to satisfy the concerns or recommendations.
Well, it looks like you guys had something like 18 or 20 different comments, and that's really what I was looking for in this. And so I appreciate all that. And I don't know who put them all together, but that's really what I was looking for from the committee. And so I appreciate those comments. And so thanks for looking at it and spend some time at this.
So there was a lot of individual effort over the last few days and weeks. It kind of all came at the end. I really wanted to be able to give you those concerns, during early in the committee meetings that we had earlier in the year, but they just didn't come up till the last. There may be some of them that are just very easy to explain. Others may require some adjustment, but we appreciate you working with us too, Mark. And we'll be willing to do whatever we can the rest of the year until we get to the national meeting. So I guess unless there's any comments, return to author with suggestions will be the status on this one, as it was on the. We had some recommendations on the Isotic Mineralogy also, and we decided it would also be in this status. The rest are approved. Unless there's some final comments anybody wants to make, we'll consider this meeting complete. So I'll give you a minute or two to comment if you think there's anything else needs to be said.
Wayne, I think you are supposed to come up with some recommendations of people to be chair and co-chair for next year.
Okay, good reminder. Are there any volunteers? We're supposed to do that at the meeting, right? So it gets done before the business meeting?
Yeah, I think someone can step in, but I think you're supposed to just have some names ready for the business meeting.
Right,
Okay.
and then we take a look at that. I think that's on Friday.
Okay. Well, if any of you wish to volunteer or volunteer somebody else, please let me know by the end of the day. And otherwise, Joey and I will be scrounging for someone to take those two roles for the next meeting.
Wayne, I'd just like to say, I appreciate your efforts. You've done all the heavy lifting on this, and appreciate what you've done pulling all this together.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
Well, I appreciate all of your assistance and especially yours, Joey, for helping keep me straight on some of the technical issues. It's a lot for all of us to get in our head and review these proposals in a short period of time, and looks like we got it done. Okay, well, we'll call this meeting adjourned, and Joey and I will work on getting some volunteers for the next meeting, and we will summarize the comments and the status of all the proposals so it can be presented at the business meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.